Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Shock Talk. Boy, we have an exciting episode planned today. We got a new guest with us, so let's get the introductions done and get on to the topic, and hopefully you guys will enjoy it. So as usual, we have Shane here today, myself, Mike, and a very honored guest and king of the cars at BILSTEIN, Scott from our product management department.
I don't know about that.
Has quite the stable of cars, and we're going to link into his stable a little bit with today's episode. So Scott, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
First of all, and let's get a brief history on you. So how did you find your way to BILSTEIN?
Well, I've been a gearhead my whole life. I started my career actually working as a Ford tech. I went through Ford factory training internship program, and so that's where my start was. And I was actually a dealer tech for a number of years, and then my career kind of changed paths. I went into basically internet auto parts sales, retail. That's where my history was, and now I moved my way over here. But I've been in the automotive world in some form or another my entire career.
So what's your role at BILSTEIN today? How did it finally end up?
I'm a segment product manager for light truck products, and so essentially I'm monitoring our whole portfolio of products for the light truck series, like pickups and Jeeps and what have you there. So my job is, a bit of everything, pricing, cataloging, all kinds of different things, and so I'm monitoring lots of different parts of the business and trying to keep my finger on the pulse of what's happening, and lots of different aspects to that job.
In my mind, I sit right next to you in the office, and you have your finger on the pulse of just about everything that's happening in the company, as far as I'm concerned. And don't be nervous because your boss is sitting here. That shouldn't affect you at all. What's going on, Shane? Anything good happening today?
Well, just dealing with car problems.
Yes, and that's what we're going to talk about. Good transition there for us. So we'll introduce the folks to the episode. Today we wanted to spend some time on a topic that is near and dear to all of our hearts sitting here. And the title was given to me as Resto Mod, but I think I'm going to change it and call it Built, Not Bought, maybe is a better way to say it, because it applies to vehicles that are older, that those of us that want to fix up a vehicle, we can go and buy them for a good price, fix them up with quality parts, and make it a little bit better. Now, Scott has a couple good examples of these. I have a good example, and Shane has a good example. So I think we'll let Scott go first, and we'll talk about what you've done with the LTD.
So that's what we're going to start with?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I've got a 1985 Ford LTD, which most people would think in their mind is something your grandpa would drive, and that's kind of what it looks like. But basically, underneath the car, it's at the Fox platform car, so it's exactly the same platform as 90s Mustang or 80s, 90s Mustang built on, and so it's like it's a blank palette to be able to kind of do a lot of different things. And so the second car I ever owned was in high school, when my first car died, was another 85 LTD, just a regular V6 whatever car.
Right.
And it was my high school car, and at that time I learned they also made a V8 version of that. I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. It'd be neat to have one of these days. And long story short, I found one in how long ago this was, back in the Auto Trader, the printed Auto Trader. Sorry, I'm dating myself here.
Yes.
Yeah, but I found it in the Auto Trader, and I bought it, and it's kind of been that way since then. I've owned, in total, I've owned 5 of these cars over the last 20, 25 years or so, one or another. So it's kind of been my one passion platform there. So I'm a big fan of the Fox platform cars. Like I said, there are lots of kind of a blank sheet of paper. You can kind of do lots of things, really good aftermarket support, which is what we're talking about here, that there's actually robust support for these older vehicles to make, an older car that when they were new, were really not all that great, you can make them into really, really great cars, handle well, perform well, be comfortable, and make an older car so much better and livable today. So that's what I've done. In a nutshell, the car, it's the modifications I've got done to it. I've got a 347 stroker, fuel-injected engine, so it's been completely swapped. And smog legal, too, which is a big deal in California.
Yes.
5-speed swap, full, basically road race suspension. It's got a whole bunch of Maximum Motorsports parts on it, so I've got a panhard bar in the back, full tubular front end, coilovers, everything like that. Of course, BILSTEIN shocks. I've had BILSTEIN shocks in the car even before I started working here. So, in fact, I probably ought to get a new set because the ones I've had on there have been on there for quite a while.
Right.
But yeah, so the car's set up. Pretty much every mechanical part of that car has been replaced or upgraded in some sort. Like I've touched everything on that car over the last 20 years, and I set up, take it to track days, go to autocross, but it's also got fully functional AC, so I can take my wife out. We go out for a drive in the mountains and have fun. So it's a kind of good all-rounder. So
well, I've seen the car. We've actually taken it to a couple shows, and it always draws a crowd, so folks are interested in it. And you touched on a few things that I wanted to talk about. When people are thinking about a project like this, you touched on the actual largeness of the project, right? You can't just go buy a car like that and drive it. I mean, you can, but it's not going to do the things you want to do. And you have to kind of plan the project out from A to B to C and just cover all the bases as you go through the car. And you also said something else that I really thought was cool, that around your high school years, you had a couple of these cars, and it was like a vision or a dream that you were going to fix this car up. As you got in your adult years, you didn't know that you would actually find one with a V8 and get it fixed up. So I think that, folks considering these projects, like myself, I've got one going like that. Shane had one that he's done a while back, but it's just really cool that, as you somehow get to your adult years, and you start to feel like an adult, you go find that car and you're like, okay, with my adult brain and my adult knowledge, I'm going to fix this up. Not like a kid who starts cutting stuff off of it and adding stuff that you don't need and doing stuff to the motor that'll make it blow up. So it's really neat to see that you chose a project that went that direction with, pretty much your heart was in it. It was like, this is something I want to do. I really like that.
Well, I think this is driving a lot of the enthusiasm, and this happens with every generation. I think a lot of the enthusiasm for the older vehicles, it comes from nostalgia from people where, our age, we get to our age here, and we look back fondly at the vehicles we remember when we were younger. We now have money to be able to do this and build it up. And so, it's cyclical. Every generation has their own, a few years ago, 60s, 70s muscle cars. Those are the big things because those are people, older generation. That's what they remember and they worked on.
Yep.
Now it's kind of moving forward. Like, the 80s, 90s cars are really getting hot. They call it that here. That's sort of the Radwood era because it's the show that supports these. And even then it's like moving forward into like the 2000s. I'm seeing some like cars like, Civic SIs and Integra Type Rs and stuff like that, the tuner side. That's becoming popular and the values of that stuff coming up because people are just, reliving their youth when they have the money to be able to do what they actually want to do and build it the way they want to do.
It's really weird.
And the aftermarket is supporting it for a lot of these platforms. These are older cars, but there's still a lot of products you can get for them and make the cars better.
It's weird that you would even consider a Honda Civic as a hot rod or a restoration product, but they are.
Yeah.
Folks are restoring them.
Weird to us.
Yeah, weird to us.
But to Garrett, that's a classic car.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, the younger generation, that car is, 25, 30 years old now, so that's a hot rod to restore. And that's, again, the point behind this episode is that these cars, they have a great value. They're not tech heavy, right? So you don't have a million computers on these things. Generally speaking, you can work on them and fix them yourself, which is really cool. I mean, if you're just a little bit mechanical, you can take these things apart and put them back together. I mean, it's not rocket science. Like, you open the hood on a modern car and you don't see anything but wires and hoses and stuff going everywhere. That
if you see anything at all, if it's not just buried in plastic.
Engine cover, it's really scary to open the hood on a modern car. And us being part of the aftermarket parts world, how long is it going to be before the manufacturers just write out the ability for us to add parts or subtract parts to a car? So these older cars eliminate that fear, right? You open the hood, there's an engine, a transmission, and a battery, a radiator, and you go to work. You just start making it what you want.
Well, I personally like, the 80s, 90s era, I think is kind of the sweet spot because you get a mix of both. You get the vehicles are modern enough to be kind of drive and feel modern. You know, the rack and pinion steering. They usually have like coil spring suspension all around, sometimes four-wheel disc brakes, things that we're expecting to make the car feel modern, but they're also old enough that they're easier to work on. Right. Before OBD, basically, it's like, you can do some diagnosis, you can do some things, you can do a lot more yourself. So I think it's sort of the sweet spot where you have something that's, livable and drivable and modern enough that can be like, you're not worried about like, I'm going over a pass now, I have to a mountain pass, and is my carburetor jet's going to be jetted correctly. You don't have to worry about that kind of stuff. You can live with it. Fuel injection is a big part of it. I converted my car to fuel injection, so that's a big part of it. But like I said, still also simple enough and basic enough that you can do things yourself. You can work on it yourself. You can change things out, and it's not going to be a huge pain. It's not like, not everything's controlled by a CAN bus where everything's tied to each other. You've changed one component, it can mess with another. Things are usually pretty independent. So, I think this is a really good era to work on, even though, it's been challenging in the past, but now the saying is these are getting more popular. Parts and support and things for this kind of stuff is actually getting better and better.
Yeah, and that's one thing that we want to point out to people watching or listening is that if you decide to get involved in one of these projects, do a little research on the vehicle that you choose, because you don't want to limit yourself to the point where, let's say you chose a Yugo or something like that, where they don't make parts for those anymore, right? So choose a platform where there's a good variety of aftermarket parts that you can add to this thing and build it up the way you want. You really don't want to choose something so unique that you have to have custom-made parts or custom-made wiring harnesses or things like this. Most of these vehicles, these common vehicles that are people are fixing up out there, the parts are readily available, and there's a big aftermarket for that sort of stuff. So would you have any advice? What's the biggest piece of advice that you would throw out there for someone who's interested in starting a project like this?
Well, I mean, there's several things. You've touched on one of them for sure. Is like, if you're going to pick a project vehicle, something like an older vehicle that you want to kind of modernize and make better, the availability of products out there, availability of support is a big thing. I'm not going to say you shouldn't pursue the weird, wacky thing. The guys who wanted to restore Yugo, whatever, go for it. I love that stuff. I love the all-ball stuff, but just know that you're going to be on an island by yourself, and you have to figure things out by yourself.
A little more fabricating, and
right? Just have to be more creative and things like that. But if you have that ability, great. That's awesome. I love that weird stuff. But there's a lot of platforms now. We've touched on some, Fox bodies, E30 BMWs, older Hondas, where there's such a robust support base out there, both on parts supplies and also just grassroots support. People have the number of people working on these innovation that people can talk and chat, and with social media and stuff, like people get shared all the time. It's crazy. I'm with my Ford. It's like, it's a 40-year-old car, and people are still coming up with new creativity, new things like that. So
make it better.
So having a support system is a good thing if it's something, if you're not able to. If you're not the kind of person to be able to do everything on your own, like if you need, having support is good. Also, I think you need to be realistic about what your capabilities are.
Absolutely.
I have my Ford, I have an E30 race car, and I have an old Toyota that I built, and all of them are all 20 plus years old. And I know that if something goes wrong with that, I basically have to do the work. I could take it to a shop, but it gets expensive. So that's something you need to be mindful of that as well. Is that you're going to live with that, you have to kind of know that you're going to have to be able to do some of this work yourself. Otherwise, you're going to be paying a lot. So you have to kind of have that ability to do yourself. I have my project cars, but I also have a Mazda 3. I drive a regular, boring Mazda 3 to work, commuter, boring car, not exciting at all. But every time I get in there, it starts. I don't have to worry about it, and that's peace of mind. Then I have my toys on the side that
you work on that car yourself too.
Exactly, that's true. That's true. But it's like, if something breaks on my project car or whatever, and I get mad or whatever, can I shut the garage door, pretend it doesn't exist for a day, and just move on? But
you still have the commuter to get you.
Yeah. So I think just being realistic about like how much talent you have, how much ability you have, how creative you want to be. Like my Ford, as much as all the mechanical parts, as all Mustang is great, all the body and interior parts, those are very hard to find. Like I unfortunately busted a tail light on my car recently, and I had to go scramble around. I had to go find one on the internet for like $100, and it's not great shape, and I was happy to be able to find one. So just have to keep all those things in mind, just what you're willing to put in, how much work you can do, and like how much you're willing to kind of sacrifice a little bit. Because driving an older vehicle like this, there's going to be some sort of a compromise, whether it be comfort, whether it be, you might have to spend your weekend times doing mechanical work that on a newer car you wouldn't have to. There's always going to be a little bit of a compromise, but from my opinion, it's worth it because you're driving something that's a lot more unique, a lot more analog. It's a lot that feeling of like you're controlling everything. It's not all screens. It gives you kind of a different feeling than newer cars today. Yeah,
I'm kind of feeling a trend in shifting away from the tech-heavy vehicles, but we'll see whether it sticks or not. It feels like it's the needle's slightly moving away from the super tech-heavy vehicles and more towards the middle of the road type vehicle where you still have a screen with navigation, or you might be able to plug in your phone or something like that, but not the super duper tech-heavy where it it does everything on its own. You just push a button and say, drive me to work. I think people have reached the point of saturation with technology on that.
Well, you know, and that type of thing is good on a commuter. Like I said, I have
Right.
a commuter car. I have a boring Mazda 3. It doesn't do anything special, whatever. And for that type of thing, that's great. Like if I had a long commute, to be able to hit a button and drive me to work is probably something I'd want. But then, you know what? On the weekend, I want to be able to go drive myself and drive up the mountains and have fun.
Really
so like
drive
having both options, I think coexisting is a good idea.
Yeah. Now, over the years, I've known Shane. He's had a lot of project vehicles. When I met him here at BILSTEIN, he was working on a few different ones. And one of them that sticks in my mind is the famous white bronchitis, the old Bronco. So
not that famous white Bronco.
Yeah, not the one that drove around L.A., not that one. But Shane did a Bronco project. Tell us about that. Tell us about some of the big problems and big overcomings that you had to do with that truck.
I still have it.
You still have it?
And I still use it to go to the local deserts and stuff. My girlfriend won't let me sell it. But it's called the bronchitis for a reason.
Yeah. Does it cough?
Because it was always something wrong with it.
Yeah.
Always.
So it's kind of a disease then.
It was demon. It still is. It's demon possessed.
Yeah.
And I think it's just because it's old.
So what did you do to it?
Amy's Ford, man. That comes with the territory.
Well, you take like an old car,
right,
and you combine it with I'm going to go drive it off road.
Right.
Two things that don't really like.
Plus the fact that Scott said it's the 80s Bronco, which was, I used to have to work on those at Ford, and they were horrible. So the motor was bad, the computer was bad, everything was bad. But what did you do to it?
Everything was bad.
Yeah.
Well, I was a big off-road racing fan.
Right.
Growing up as a teenager, and I used to watch ESPN, Sport Vision or whatever, and watch the old desert races with Ivan Stewart and Robbie Gordon, and I wanted to work at BILSTEIN because I wanted to be involved in that industry. So, I spent years like doing contingencies and
seeing all the trucks,
meeting the people, going to the races, supporting the racers we had. And at that time we were pretty heavily involved in desert racing. But anyways, I did learn very fast how expensive and how much money it costs to have a race team and go racing. So me on my salary, weren't
going to be able to do that.
I didn't own half of San Diego real estate. So.
Yeah.
I mean, these people that do desert racing are millionaires. Like even if you have a class 11,
still got to be a millionaire.
You're probably borderline a millionaire.
Yep.
So anyways, I don't have that kind of money. So I loved going to the desert. My uncle had a 1990 Bronco, and I've had this car for a long time, right?
Plus, it's been in the family. Your uncle owned it before.
Yeah. He
How
had
long
it.
Have you owned that, Shane? Just curious.
I want to say probably 20 years.
Yeah.
Oh, I might beat you. I've had my LTD since 2001.
Yeah. So there's that connection. It's a family vehicle. It was fairly capable. Let's fix it up.
It was a connection back to the desert racing, because when I first like watching that stuff, a lot of it was Ford twin traction beam.
Yep.
Like the Robbie Gordon truck.
We just got to clear this up for people. Okay, it's a white Bronco. It looks exactly like the one that OJ was driving.
It's not.
No, it's a brick Shen. It's a brick nose.
No, he was an OBS. This was a brick nose.
Ah, so there was a difference. So the cops don't chase you around wondering if you're OJ. Okay, good.
So it's a brick nose. Anyways, my uncle had it, and then I don't know. It was between cars. I was either going to get like a JK that was going to be new, and I didn't want to buy a new car, and he was begging me to take this Bronco, so I bought it for $3,000, and pretty much everything on it has been replaced. Go back to if you're gonna take on a project like a Bronco, and that's gonna be your off-road car,
wheeling vehicle, yeah,
you'll probably spend more money maintaining that car than a car payment on a new Jeep.
Oh no, that's not a good story.
It's just none of the stuff under the hood can get rattled that bad. So, for me, I really had to when I first got it. What I did do it as I did a suspension, pretty custom suspension, that modeled after like a Class 8 truck. So it's got. Well, actually, a Class 8s back in those days did not have coilovers, but I did a 9100 coilover on the front.
Right.
It's been on there for 80, 90,000 miles, never needed to be rebuilt. And this is a race shock, right? Still doesn't leak. So I did a coilover on it and long radius arms with Heim joints. The twin traction beam has Heim joints in the center.
Right.
So it gets 18 inches of wheel travel in the front. And, the back, we did a nice deaver pack with a shock underneath the tub, which works pretty good, but it could be better if it was going through the cab. But anyways, it's got another 18 inches of wheel travel back there. So it's like Class 8 off-road suspension. It's got a big push bumper in the front with 4 lights, Baja Design Soltec lights.
Right.
One of them doesn't work, but 3 of them do.
Yeah. So
but,
3 survived, 1 didn't.
So yeah, but the idea was to go. I wanted to go. We're in California, so all the dirt roads out in the California desert, I've probably been on half of them. Between Barstow and Las Vegas was the playground, and also down here in Borrego. And
how many miles do you figure you drove it off road?
It's got 215,000 miles right now. And my uncle, it's never been a daily driver. It was his off-road car too.
Right.
He'd take his family to Death Valley and places like that. So I would say it's a large majority of the miles have been off-road.
Yeah.
So it doesn't get very good gas mileage. So I had to carry, back when Rotopacks first came out, the big 4-gallon ones, I could put, I have a rear swing out tire carrier.
And it's all for gas.
And I can hold 16 gallons of gas on the back bumper.
Because it was a 20-gallon gas tank in the rear on those, and then you carry another 16.
It was 34 gallons.
Wow, 34 gallons.
And if you've been in the middle of the Mojave Desert, it's a long ways to a gas station if you're in the middle of there.
Right.
You could easily be 50 to 100 miles away from a gas station. And so, at the time I wanted to do trips across the desert.
Long
and
range,
if you run out of gas and ice, you got to go to the gas station. And if you run out of ice, you got to go get more ice. So it had a fridge, going to first gen A or B fridges in there, lots of gas and lots of suspension travel, and you can go whale across the California desert in this thing.
Now, was this a vehicle as a kid, or is this something that you dreamed about as a kid, or was it just something that you made work because that's what you got? Yeah, but you said you were watching the racers and wanted a truck like that.
That was the truck of choice, in my opinion.
Right.
And even till this day, I don't know if there's a better vehicle that's been made for for doing desert exploration
truck. Yeah,
that has an awesome suspension system that gets a lot of wheel travel. They call them the whoop scissors, right?
Yep.
Twin traction beam.
Twin traction beam. Yeah.
And it's short. And it's full size, but short. That's not something you can get.
Sleep in the back if you want.
Right.
Yeah, it's set up to sleep in the back.
Yeah.
Didn't need a rooftop tent. Well, I'm sure rooftop tents at that time were available.
No, they weren't. They didn't.
In South Africa, right?
Yeah, they didn't come out for a few more years, but yeah, and again, we look at these older vehicles, and they were just so cool and so capable. To me, it really makes sense. If you're trying to put a project together and stay on a budget and have something that you can work on, right, to get all of those things to work together.
I don't think you could stay on a budget because you don't know what's going to come up.
No, and I'm running into that
too. You have to be aware of. There's things that you won't expect and they'll pop up, so you got to be able to deal with that.
I think one thing I hear with people doing, like Broncos, I'm going to get this, it's going to be great. It's your electric window is going to break. Then the next time you're going to go out, your back window is going to break.
Yep.
Then it's just not going to start, right? But you can usually you can maybe figure out why.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It just, you name it.
Yeah.
It's going to go wrong. And when you replace that thing 2 years ago, 3 years ago, you're going to replace it again 3 years later.
Well, especially off road. Yeah.
You know? So it's like I said at the beginning of my little speech here, a new car with a car payment is going to be cheaper than trying to maintain an old Bronco and try to wheel it across the desert.
So that's
costs a
your
lot
take.
more.
I think yours is an extreme example there,
Yeah.
because you're not just taking a vehicle. This is not just on the street. You're abusing this off road.
Yeah.
That's where that comes down to it.
Yeah.
Like if you just had a Bronco built up and you're just driving around the streets, you'd probably be all right.
Probably okay.
Like
Right.
you wouldn't
And
be spending so much money. But to your point, you're out there, everything just gets rattled to death.
Well, I don't
Take it
really
out,
abuse
break
it too. Like when the thing rattles, like you don't want the car to rattle. So
Right.
as long as you can drive as fast, in my opinion, I drive as fast as I can
Until it rattles.
until it rattles.
Yeah.
And if it's rattling, I drive so it doesn't rattle. But
Yeah.
when you go for it and it's rattling, that's when like things just are. If it's not happy, it's telling you it's not happy.
Yeah, exactly.
But it really
Listen to the
depends
car.
on like how hard you're using it. Yours is definitely an extreme use case where you're actually taking an older vehicle and really putting it to its test. Like my Ford though, like I do autocross it occasionally, but like I built it up. I've done a lot of work to make it reliable, and like I kind of don't actually have to touch it. I've
Right.
done a lot of work to pre-plan, get everything
Yes.
working right. Everything under the hood's new. I've replaced everything, so like I know I can hop in. I can go drive to LA right now to a show with the AC running, and I don't have a problem there. But then on the flip side, to kind of to align with what Shane's saying, I also have a BMW E30 race car. And like, yeah, that's now a 35-year-old car that I'm racing out there. Like every time I bang a fender, like I used to be able to go down to the pick you part and there'd be like 50 down there and I could just pull one easily. Well, now there's not anymore. So like, but when you're using an older vehicle hard like that, whether it be off-road or on the track or whatever, it does start to get expensive. And that's the point where the same thing, I guess maybe you might have to kind of determine what's your use case here. If you just want a cool cruiser or whatever, then I think you could probably get away with the argument of saying that, like, a cool cruiser, as long as it's not something that's a complete pile, it probably won't cost you all that much. It probably would be less than a car payment. But then you're doing the extreme, man, like Shane's doing his Bronco, I'm doing my BMW, then yeah, it does get expensive and you have to be aware of that. I'm about to retire. It's a 24-hour Lemons race car that somehow we've been racing since 2008. It's actually survived that long. But I'm about to retire it. I'm going to do my last race next week. And I'm retiring the car because it's just getting too expensive and hard to get stuff for it. Like, even the engine that's in there is from an E36, the next generation car.
Because you couldn't find one of the ones.
Well, no, because the next generation car is a better engine.
Okay.
But then I have like kind of weird oddball version of it, and I can't find parts for it anymore. So if I want to find parts for it, now I have to pay a premium. Like it gets expensive. So, I wouldn't say just universally that one way or the other that it's going to, building up an older car like this is going to be either cheaper or more expensive. Really kind of depends on your use case, what you're actually doing with it.
Yeah.
Like time as well.
Time for sure.
I do not have time.
Yes. Absolutely. It's
Yeah.
a time suck. Yeah, that's what I was saying. If you want to do this, you need to be able to commit time and energy to this.
Garage time, yeah.
Garage time. I have some friends who have just had children and just had babies, and they're
more time.
And they're really struggling to go like, oh, I don't have time to work on these things anymore. It's like, yeah, your life priorities have shifted. You can't do that anymore. It's not just the money. It's truly the time is a big part of it.
Yeah.
I've spent for the last 2 months getting ready for this the Lemons race I'm doing. I've spent like every weekend spending like every day in the garage, and that's a lot of time. And I can afford to do that because I don't have children and I have a very forgiving wife.
Yeah.
But it's not everybody's in that scenario. Not everybody has that luxury.
Yeah.
If you don't, I was going to say, if you don't have time to do it, then you
have to pay somebody.
Then you have to pay
and then it
somebody.
gets expensive if you can find somebody to work on it, because some of these older vehicles, like it's hard to find somebody to even touch it.
I've got a good mechanic that works on my Bronco, and like anything's $1,000.
Yeah, he's not cheap, right?
I'm my good mechanic. I have no
Yeah,
idea.
exactly.
I don't have time.
Right.
Yeah,
I literally don't have time to do it.
And we were talking about this before we started today, is that, I did the hot rod business here at BILSTEIN when I started here, and I got exposed to a lot of people fixing up old cars, and you guys said, hey, wait a minute, those cars are too old. We're not talking about, 67 Camaros and all that stuff. We're now the next generation forward in those cars. Right. So
Gen X.
Yeah. So when I hear
it's actually getting past that now. I'm the very like old youngest Gen X. Like most of this is moving to like the millennials.
Well, that's the point I was getting to, is that most of the folks that I met at these hot rod shows that were doing a project like this, but an older car, they're retired. Right? And they've already put aside a budget to build this car, and they're either paying someone or doing it themselves, but they hopefully stick to the budget. And that's where I want to get to my project, where I've been completely discouraged, right? So I just came back from Overland Expo in Flagstaff, and this ties into the resto mod or the build not bought scenario. So I ran into a lot of people there that are fixing up the first gen Tacos, Tundras, and runners, Sequoias, things like that. And I thought, you know what, this kind of ties into today's episode as well, is a lot of folks are finding value, and Scott's done one as well, in these older vehicles. And my point to the project is that when you start this, really consider how many things you're going to want to or have to fix on a vehicle with 100,000 miles plus on it, right? So I thought, you know, I've owned this truck for 22 years. Mine's a first-gen Tundra, and it's never given me a problem. Typical Toyota, right? No problems. But you start working on this truck, and, you know, you pull on the door handle and it comes off in your hand, and you go to open the tailgate and the handle comes off in your hand. So little things like that start breaking. And then you start thinking about, well, let's redo the front suspension. Okay, where do we start and where do we stop? You could literally take that front suspension all the way back to the, you know, the transfer case, or, you know, the front axle, if you will. You know, there's $2,000 or $3,000 worth of parts from the CV axle to the outboard, and then you haven't even included the tire. And I didn't think about all that. You know, I thought, oh, I'm just going to do, you know, upgrade the shocks, a few little things here and there, and then the project just takes over. What's the word for it, Scott? What's the word that the product management guys call? Gargoyling, yeah. You just keep going from rabbit hole to rabbit hole to rabbit hole.
Not sure where that came from, but that's the inside joke here.
And you're thinking,
you just go down that rabbit hole and then you don't get out.
But it's a thought process. It's like, why am I going to take something apart and put the vehicle back together with a part that's got 100,000 miles on it?
while I'm in there.
Exactly. So the while I'm in there theory or principle takes over. And I think folks need to be aware that if you're working on one of these projects, consider that, because it makes a lot of sense. Are you really going to put a 22-year-old rubber bushing back in your car?
Yep.
I mean, is it still good? Maybe.
But that goes into the whole thing is like, what's your time and money?
Exactly.
Because I didn't even think about it in this context. I've done essentially what the topic of this podcast is. When I started working here, I didn't have a truck. Well, I had an old F-150 years ago, but I work in truck products and I didn't have a truck. I'm like, all right, we got to change that.
Okay, yeah, something's got to
And
change.
so I was actually looking for something that was like, all right, something old enough that was like, finds the sweet spot where it's reliable, but has a robust aftermarket. You can do things, build onto it.
And cheap.
And cheap enough, but has also a good support base, a fan base. And so I was in that position, like looking for like what I wanted to buy. And, you know, I was looking for something that can kind of maybe not do any one thing particularly well, but kind of do multiple things, a sort of a Swiss Army knife. And so I ultimately ended up getting a 2004 Sequoia, and I've built up as my little camp, sort of like camp off road rig, not to the same level you're doing. You know, Mike's building his first gen Tundra, with, you know, the Sequoia and Tundra are pretty much the
similar,
same.
yeah.
And he's taking it to a level that way beyond that I'm willing to do. I've sort of tried to be pretty pragmatic about it and sort of draw the line. It's like, all right, I want it to be capable enough to do.
You held to your budget.
I held to my budget and held the line there. And sometimes you got to do that because. Because as you've seen, it's very easy for things to kind of spiral out of control if you're not careful about that. So I think that's part of what you got to have too. You got to have that discipline to know like when to stop and when to draw the line. Because
trust me, my credit card company knows that I have no discipline, and it's just it never stops.
It's like, you know, I was like, no, I'm good with the 2-inch lift. It doesn't need to go beyond that. I got my 6112s on there, put some 32-inch tires. You know, took the running boards off. I'm good. That's pretty much all I need there. But, you know, you could just go hog wild. So you
but
do
it
have to
still
kind of
was
a
built,
line.
not bought. I mean, I saw it when you first brought it home. Let's call it home, and it was just it was a soccer mom, you know, car that never went off road, and you turned it into something that is a little bit more capable. It's all fresh. It's all new.
I built the whole camping platform in the back. I've slept in the back of that thing like 3 weeks now. I use it to tow my race car. So, like, you know, try to just do lots of different things.
And you've tapped into a few things that I think folks would be interested in as well. So, like, you get in one of these older cars, right? There's either a tape deck or a CD player or both, but nothing modern. No Apple CarPlay, none of this stuff. But you actually upgraded some of the electronics. You added a backup camera or took a backup camera off. So all of this is possible with these older cars if you just take your time and figure it out.
That was a huge upgrade, just putting a CarPlay head unit in the Sequoia and a backup camera, and like immediately just modernized it. Just made it so much better. As I can plug in my Google Maps now and stuff like that. So,
and it's not tech overburdened.
It's not. It's not. So you can make changes. This is the beauty of I think this era. Like I said, you're in the sweet spot. It's like you got the reliability. You've got a vehicle. It's not like you're not dealing with something that's 4-wheel drum brakes and, you know, leaf springs and recirculating ball steering box where everything just feels old. They feel feel better. They feel modern. They feel like a newer vehicle, but they're still simple enough that you can play with that. I can replace the head unit on that. And nowadays you can't do that. Everything's all integrated with the HVAC and everything. So you have that ability to do that, and it gives you a little bit more of ability to play with it and do things that you want, or work on it yourself if you have the ability.
Yeah. I mean, from a BILSTEIN standpoint, I don't know that everybody knows, but we have parts for cars going back to early 50s.
1948 is the oldest vehicle we support. We have something for a 1948 Porsche 356.
And really? You know, this is one of the cars I wanted to talk about. If you go back in history on the Porsche and BMW, Mercedes products, I mean, 1957 was our gas pressurized monotube on that. It's just like, wow, there's all these old cars back, way back, that BILSTEIN has product for. Now, Shane and Scott have done a good job on getting the trucks up to speed back in the older days. Let's call it, let's say back 20 years back or 25 years back. And when I did the car stuff and hot rod stuff, we had parts for the older muscle cars and, you know, the older Corvettes, Camaros, Dodge cars, Ford cars, Mustangs, and things like that. So BILSTEIN has always been connected or part of the legend of these old cars being put back together. When I was doing the hot rod and muscle car stuff, people just raved about the product. It's basically the stock shock, but modern on the inside, and they love that. I mean, they can put the car together without major modifications and have a modern riding car. It's really cool. I mean, and Scott and I with our first gen Sequoia and Tundra, we're not going crazy with the suspension. It's a 6112, but it's way better than what the truck came with.
Yep.
It's way more tunable. You can adjust the ride height. And they last longer. I got 140,000 miles on my 6112s, and that's a lot for, you know, a prototype 6112. Yeah. That's a lot of miles. Yep. So it's really incredible to me what you can do if you put this all together and try to make sense out of it. I want to give Scott a minute to talk about the Lemons car, because that's really cool. I mean, this is your last race. How many years have you been doing that?
Since 2008. So what is that, 17 years?
17 years. It's the same car.
The same car. We've been racing the same car. It's gone through 3 themes, but the same car.
Now, since, fill us in on the themes.
The first racetrack we raced that doesn't even exist anymore. To give you an idea.
Fill us in on the themes, because there's some interesting ones and some history behind the themes. So what was the first theme?
Well, this may or may not be PC for this, but I'm going to say it anyway. Yep. But so the car is an 87 BMW 325. We picked it at the time we started racing back in 2007. So I've been involved in the 24 Hour of Lemons. They started the series in 06. I've been racing it since 07, so almost since the very beginning.
Right.
First started with another team. And then decided to bring basically a bunch of my friends together. We wanted to do it. This was fun. And so we're looking for the same thing. We're looking for at that, you know, granted this is 15 years ago or however many years ago, but we were looking for something that, at least at the time, was like, okay, somewhat readily available. You can get parts for, not something that's like super difficult to work on, anything that's really complicated.
Keep it in the budget. Yeah.
Keep it in the budget, things like that. And it just so happened that a couple of my friends who are on my team, they're big BMW guys, were part of like the BMW club and everything like that. And somebody in their club had this 87 325E for sale for $400. Car was fine, wouldn't pass smog, I think, and it was missing the stereo or something like that. So we bought it for $400, legit, 100% within the budget. It's 24 Hours of Lemons. The budget is for $500 cars. I mean, It's still $500. They haven't changed in the years since then. Nowadays, they're pretty lax on that because finding an actual true $500 car is kind of hard nowadays. But still, the whole point is low budget there. So yeah, that was the inspiration. We wanted to find, again, trying to find something that would perform well. It was like, you know, reasonably fast on the track, or handled well at least, that we can get parts for easily, that had a decent support system, you know, just the fan base. Well, not just that, but just like from people, you know, the forum. I'm dating myself here again. Like, you know, you used to do lots of web forums and stuff like that for this. Now it's kind of on the social media. So that was the decision process to figure out what we wanted to get. And as it just so happened to be somebody in the club had this car for sale for cheap. And so we bought it. So the first theme that we did, well, I guess just a little bit of back context, 24 Hours of Lemons is a racing series, road racing series for $500 cars. I use my finger quotes. But it's a endurance racing over a long period of time. Most of the races are basically like 8 hours on Saturday, 8 hours Sunday. Over the weekend, you're doing 16 hours or so. But some of the races occasionally do are actual full 24-hour races. And in fact, the race I'm doing next week is a 25-hour race, actually 25 hours and 1 minute. To beat the record of the longest race I've ever had that track. So that's just a backstory of that. And they really highly encourage like wacky themes. They really like either cars that never belong on a track. Like I've raced a Hyundai Excel, I've raced a Yugo, stuff like that, or just ridiculous themes. And so we went the theme way. And the first theme that we did was a play on the joke. What's the difference between a porcupine and a BMW, Mike?
I have no idea.
On a porcupine, the pricks are on the outside.
Ah, I remember this joke. Yeah.
So hope I didn't offend any BMW people here. It's a total joke, but we did this. So the first car we did, we built it up. We called it the Porcupine, where we painted it brown.
I remember.
We had a whole bunch of styrofoam. We made quills into it, so we made it into a giant porcupine. So imagine a giant cartoon porcupine going around the racetrack.
Okay, I remember the second one, but explain that one.
So the second one was, we wanted to kind of do something else, move into a different theme, and we're just trying to think of like famous TV movie cars, things like that hadn't been done before, and we converted our car into an homage to Christine, so Stephen King's, the book and the movie back in the 80s.
And that car,
which I guess they're going to be remaking that movie now. So
what was that car? It was a Cadillac.
It was a '58 Plymouth.
58
Fury.
Plymouth. So you made a BMW.
We recreated the car into a '58 Plymouth Fury. So painted red, put giant fins on the back, put on the front, like made chrome bumpers out of foil tape. I mean, again, this is all cheap,
exactly
stuff. Made the front end look like a '50s car. One of my coworkers, his dad owned a company that does aftermarket billet grills, and so he put a big billet grill on the front and stuff like that. So that was the second theme that we did, and we called it Prickstein to kind of continue on. So we're the pricks, and so rather than Christine, we're Prickstein.
Right.
And then following that, we decided we wanted to change up. In all honesty, the motivation was we put a lot of work into building these big sheet metal fins on the back of the car, big like 50s car fins.
We wanted to keep them.
And we're like, what can we leverage that work into something else? And so we're trying to think of other things. And everybody in the fan, we're all of the same age. We're all in our 40s now, so we all grew up on The Simpsons. We're big fans of The Simpsons. And we're like, hold on a second. What about the Homer?
Right.
So this is a car that an old episode of the show, Homer Simpson learns that he has a long-lost brother, voiced by Danny DeVito, who owns his own car company. And once they reunite, his brother allows him to design a car for the average American in any way that he wants. And so, Homer Simpson being Homer Simpson builds a car that is just an atrocity. So bright green, huge, Rolls Royce grill on the front, big fins on the back, a wing over it. It's got a huge dome on the back. maybe you can superimpose a photo in here while I explain this here. But, so it's all the stuff from Homer Simpson's dream car. La Cucaracha horn, a giant cup holder, got a big squishy cup on the door there, permanently on there. So that was the theme that we went on this time. And like I said, it was mainly just to kind of reuse it. But circling back to what I'm saying, we've been doing this for long enough now that we started racing. These cars were easy to find. Parts were cheap. It was no problem. Like you can go pick your part without tripping over an E30. Now they're all gone. Now those are valuable cars. That car that I bought for $400, which is like the least desirable. It was like the 325E, which is like the economy motor, and a four-door sedan, and it wasn't the sport. So basically a taxi cab spec, essentially. We bought it for $400. Like that car as it sits today, even without passing smog and everything, would be easily like a $2,500 car.
Right.
So it's just getting hard. The parts are getting hard to find. Everything's getting more expensive. And so we've been doing this for a long time. And on a personal basis, it's just a lot of work. I do like probably 80% of the work myself in my garage, just my weekend time. And so we've decided it's time to retire. So we've got one last song, this 25-hour race that we have coming up at the end of the week.
So some famous people gave you an opportunity to share this car. Why don't you share that with our viewers in case they don't know?
Sure. So when we built up the Homer, we built it up because the Lemon series, 24 Hours Lemons, again, they like wacky themes. People do all kinds of homages to famous, TV and movie cars. Your General Lee, your Kit, your Back to the Future DeLorean. Everything you can think of has been done before. The Homer had never been done before. So that was our motivation. It was like, oh, what's never been done in Lemons before? Not realizing that nobody had ever done like a real life replica of that car ever before. And so when we built it, we just literally just kind of put together little YouTube clip videos just showing us driving around, hitting the cucaracha horn, whatever. Threw it up on YouTube just as a goof to go like, here's what we did. And all of a sudden we had 750,000 hits. Like it blew up. We were not expecting this at all. It was completely caught us off guard. And through that, we basically blew up. We had our kind of 15 minutes of fame. We were featured in the New York Times. Like I got a printed front page of the automotive section of the New York Times, which has my car on it, which is cool. I remember driving to a track and listening to NPR, and they were talking about us on NPR as I was listening to it. We were in all these magazines and stuff, and then word somehow got through to Fox/Simpsons people, which at first is a bad thing. So we learned later, and luckily it didn't happen, but we learned later that initially Fox Studios or the Fox lawyers, Fox legal team, was going to be sending us a cease and desist notice for, I guess, infringing in their intellectual property. Knowing that like we weren't trying to profit off this at all. This is just us fans of the show wanting to build a cool car and race it. Right. We were not trying to profit off of this anything. This is just us doing this for fun. Well, thankfully, apparently, Matt Groening, the creator of The Simpsons, and some other things as well, he's been around for a long time, he caught wind of the car and was like, no, like these are fans. These people should be celebrated. They shouldn't be penalized. Right. And so instead of getting a cease and desist notice, we ended up getting an invitation to be part of the promotion for the 25th season of the show. This is back in 2013, I think, so it was a while back. And we got invited to the Fox Studios. So we towed the car up to the Fox Studios. We got to meet all the people from Gracie Studios. That's the studios within Fox that does The Simpsons and Futurama and a bunch of other shows like that. So yeah, so they put up posters all around Fox Studios, like, you see the Homer car. It was like crazy. Like they're actually announcing us ahead of time as a thing. And so we parked the car in front of the studios, and there was, it was a big press event. It was actually a press event to promote the 25th season of the show with news cameras and people being interviewed and stuff. And we got to talk to Matt Groening and interview him and several of the other people from The Simpsons, Sam Simon and David X. Cohen from Futurama and stuff. And they even made basically a little hot lap around the parking lot. They cleared a course, basically a little lap around there. So I was doing hot laps around there, like squealing tires around the Fox Studios parking lot in the Homer car. It was a surreal experience. It was absolutely crazy. And so that happened. That was in 2013. And then just last year, just circling back, we thought they kind of forgot about us and we're just like, out of their mind now. We got invited to, it's called D23. It's essentially like Comic-Con for Disney. It's a specific comic. Right. So Fox is now under the Disney umbrella, and so that means The Simpsons is under Disney. It's all under Disney now. And every 2 years, they have this huge fan convention, like 200,000 attendees for Disney. It's called D23. And last year, 2024, what they were doing is putting together a Disney car show. So all kinds of cars from all kinds of, and not just Disney's, like everything under the Disney umbrella. There's Fast and Furious cars. There's stuff from like, Scooby-Doo and cartoon car, all kinds of stuff. And they invited us to the show. And we're like, hey, we want your car to be in the show. And at first, actually, the car, we had raced it previously, not long before that. We blew the engine. The car was not running. The car had a blown engine. It was still covered in dirt, whatever. So we actually said no at first. We're like, no, it's going to be a lot of work. And long story short, they sweetened the pot enough. They gave us a bunch of tickets and stuff. They were like, all right, we'll do this. And we at least visually restored the car, cleaned it up, like all the touch-up paint, everything. It wasn't running still. Towed it to the show. They towed it to the show, and it was in this show. Got to be seen by hundreds of thousands of Disney fans. So still surreal to me. Like we just did this as just like for fun, for racing. Like, just to go out there and we want to do some racing with some friends is just a goof, and never expected it to be kind of like our 15 minutes of fame and like actually give us some notoriety.
Yeah, that just proves that when you get involved in these projects, you just never know who's watching, right? I mean, Shane with his Bronco, it's been famous at BILSTEIN for sure. The bronchitis has been around the BILSTEIN garage for a long time, and we always joke about it. And then when Scott came on with the Lemons car, it was here every time it changed shapes or colors or that, he would bring it in and we'd all wander around it and check it out. And there's a lot of value, I think, in these restorations for younger people, for older people. I mean, guys like me. I'm building my so-called retirement vehicle. Who knows if it'll live that long, you know, and you read about other people getting into projects like this. And to me, it's kind of like a combination of your abilities, your desires, and your heart, which kind of gets you to a point where you have a vehicle, or you can go buy one, right? I mean, that's the two. You know, and when Junior was here, he was always talking about, you know, there's the just buy all the parts and throw it at the car overlander, and then there's someone who truly builds it, right? So I guess that kind of ties into this episode where the value builder, or someone who has a feeling or nostalgia about a certain car or type of car, they're out there building these things. They're passionate about these things. When you talk to them at the expos and things, you know, the first gen guys, all of the Toyota stuff, even the cruisers, and even cars older back, like the Volkswagen Thing or some of the Volkswagen vans. I mean, the guys are passionate about these cars, and they want to restore them to a good, solid driving state.
Well, it's not just restore. That's what they'll talk about. It's like it's taking it beyond restoring.
Right.
That's the thing they're trying to modernize and
a
make
little
it better,
bit beyond, right?
Yeah.
You know, modern tires and wheels,
Right.
rims, shocks, brakes.
Shocks, exactly.
Yeah,
you know?
everybody's got, I mean, and that's something we wanted to touch on before we wrap up, is that also remember when you're doing a project like this, like I started to point out, that you open up a large can of worms, which has been discussed in great detail here. You know, you start changing parts around. One part affects another part, affects another part, affects another part, and all of a sudden, as Shane and I have discussed about adding aftermarket parts to a vehicle, there's no going back from there. You know, you're fully stuck in the aftermarket world, and now you're on your own, right? You've modified it to the point where Toyota doesn't help you anymore. They're like, okay, you're on your own. We built this car to work this way, and you've gone a completely different direction. Same with the BMW or the Bronchitis. It's no longer a Ford. It's barely a BMW, and it's hardly a Toyota anymore. I mean, it still has the badging, but you got to remember, you lose the support and the engineering of all those big companies when you change these things so far beyond what, you know,
Well,
what
so I
they
said
were
before,
signed
I think you sort of like need to be realistic and sort of draw a line on how far you want to go. You can go like the approach you said with Junior, where you're like throwing every part, you're doing everything.
But it's all
or
bolt
you can
on,
be
yeah.
Bolt on, or you can kind of draw the line and go like, no, this is what I want
Yeah.
to do. And I think that's a big
Conservative,
part of it.
yeah.
You know, I'm pretty pragmatic and conservative and frankly cheap. I don't like spending money when I don't need to.
Right.
And so I try to plan things out there. Some other people like to go whole hog, and that's fine too. You
Right.
just need to be realistic
Yeah.
about it.
In product management, we used to have this thing called the happy face, sad face.
Yeah, we still have
we
it.
still have it.
We still have it. We
But
talk about it on podcast. And what happens, Shane?
Go
Well-
too far to the right, and if that smile turns upside
There's
down.
the happy face, and then there's the sad face.
Right.
And one thing could turn you into the sad
Totally one thing.
face. So drawing the line. So what are you going to do with how much time, effort you want to put into this? Like one of our old coworkers, he had an old Dodge four-wheel drive pickup truck.
Right,
And
right.
he's like, I'm going to do a Cummins swap. And it was like,
That was the beginning of the
That
sad
was the
face.
sad face.
Yeah.
now you're going to have to do the transmission. Now
Right,
you're going to have
right.
to do this. And now you're like,
Snowballs.
Yep.
and then he had to go to the junkyard, and he had to go. We drove to like Arizona and bought some parts, and he like.
And it's still sitting in the yard unfinished, right?
Well, you have to accumulate all these. Well, that was just like an example, but
Right.
it was like if you go across the line, like doing an LS swap and an Xterra, just know you're.
But
you're
I
on
mean,
your
the
own.
line
It's
is
painful territory.
yeah, the line is a lot simpler than that. I mean, you don't have to go LS swap.
Yeah, you don't have to. That's what
Yeah.
I'm saying. There's all kinds of degrees of that. There's a whole spectrum of like, you know, again, I built a full race car. Shane built a Bronco that's capable of like desert racing and
Yep.
stuff like that. You don't have to go all the way there. You
Right.
can kind of be more reasonable about
Well,
it.
I'm
And just
just-
have a driver, and then, you know, I love Radwood. Like I go to that show every year, and there's so many people who just have driver cars. There's
Yeah.
nothing super
Simple
special
stuff,
about
yeah.
it. Just you know, they upgrade
Clean
the
and
shocks. They
simple.
put a little bit better tires on. They do little things here and there, make the cars better. And a lot of those people are just interested more in the aesthetic. I mean, I
Right.
think we really haven't talked about. We've talked about a lot of like the negatives of how it can be a painful thing if you let it be.
Right.
But like ultimately, you got to just decide how far you want to go there. You know, how much you're willing to sacrifice, how much you want to do to get the benefit, which again we haven't really talked about, which is like a lot of people just like the aesthetics of the older cars better. Like, you know, nowadays a lot of people say like newer cars are just amorphous blobs, and like older cars have more character,
less ties to technology,
or at least less ties to technology, more analog. You know, no traction control or stability control, stuff
more
like
driver
that.
input.
So you know, that's not for everybody, admittedly. You know, your average person driving your Altima down the road probably doesn't give a crap about that stuff. But there's a subset of us who really do, and it matters. But, you know, there's a full spectrum of that. You know, you can go just to people just like I have some friends who just have older 80s and 90s cars, and they just buy it and keep it up, and that's all they do. And then I have ones who are going the Shane and mine, where we're going all the way and modifying everything. There's a whole spectrum, and it can be painful if you let it be, but if you draw the line and just go like, no, this is what I want to do, then, you know, it doesn't have to be painful, and it doesn't have to cost as much as a car payment. At that point, like, it actually does become a little bit easier and you know, just nicer to manage.
But what I wanted to point out is along the lines what Shane was saying is that, you know, if you're starting one of these projects, and let's just say, you know, you pick up a, you know, first gen Taco, and what's the first thing off-road guys want to do, or overland guys want to do? They want to change the suspension and tires. Yep. Well, something as simple as changing the rim offset or putting too big of a tire can kill that project like day one if you don't do your research. You know, so this is where I'm going with this particular point, is that people need to kind of have the end vision already in their mind before they start turning wrenches, and that will save you a lot of pain, right? Research how much change you can add to that suspension, or how much you can lift or lower the vehicle, and how much offset you can run on those wheels before they contact the brake rotors or the tires get into the fenders. Simple stuff like that can be just such a headache. I mean,
and research like where it can snowball. Like,
yeah,
you know, there's a YouTuber that we're a fan of that does a lot of in-depth analysis on Toyota stuff.
Yeah, we can say his name.
All right, Tinker's Adventure.
Yeah,
great channel. I love the channel. If you approach things in a very fact-based way.
Yep.
I love watching his channel, because it's like you make this one decision and it affects this decision, and it affects this decision. All of a sudden, like, I decided to buy these cool wheels and tires because they have this. Well, you
now
push
the truck
your wheel
drive.
offset goes out, and now you're pushing it back into the fender or into the you know, it's starting to rub against the body mount, stuff like that. Whereas, like, if you had just bought wheels with a slightly different offset, or if you had just adjusted your cast a little bit different, or a tiny bit smaller tire, like one size down, you could avoid all kinds of stuff. Yeah. So it's very easy to get down that path, and like you said, get to the point where the fact Toyota's not going to save you. You're now in this hole, and you got to dig yourself out of it.
And now the project's not fun anymore.
About it.
Yeah, you're like your wife's yelling at you because you've bought 4 sets of wheels. None of them fit. Tires are piling up in the garage. You still can't drive the car. So yeah, be careful with that. Just a warning, guys. Just a warning. Plan it out from the very beginning. You know, I'm a very step-by-step, plan-it-out technical guy, and I've already got snagged a few times throughout this project. So, but it's mainly me deciding where the line is after I get into the project, instead of determining it. You know, if I had said I'm replacing every piece of rubber and anything that moves on this car from day one, I would have had a better idea of how much I was going to spend. But I tried to start off like Scott. I kind of went down the same path, and then I went, no, I think I want to do it a little bit different. And the whole thing turned into a mess. So
I think having a vision, just what your vision is a really key piece to this. And I guess that applies to any project in general. But in this topic here, where you're talking about going into an older vehicle, just know that there are downsides, and you have to be aware of those downsides, and you have to have a plan for that, or at least be able to work around it or deal with it in some way. Yeah. Whether that be, you know, hitting it with your wallet and paying for it, and that's expensive, or something like that. Just know that there are going to be some pain points, but we all do it because we love these cars.
Be ready for.
We think it's interesting. Like in my case here, you know, I have an oddball car. I've owned the LTD for 20 years. I've owned it from a point when back then it was just a used car nobody cared about. Now, like, those people are like, oh, that's cool because it stands out. But, like, you know, you really have to kind of be passionate about that and just know what you're getting into and understand what the limitations are going to be, and know that, you know, you can be painful or it can be pleasurable depending on what you're doing, what you're aiming for.
Well, thanks for joining us today, Scott. We really appreciate your insight and your knowledge on the topic today, and really the cool cars that you've built over the years. Good luck at the race. Thank you. I hear the weather's going to be very, very warm there, so drink lots of Gatorade or something. I don't know. I don't know what you do, but be careful out there. Don't overheat, and maybe show us post some footage of what's going on, and maybe we can show it to the viewers at some point at the racetrack. We're obviously supporting you and interested in how you do. And for our listeners and viewers, if you've got projects that you've done that you want to show us, Garrett, what's the symbol? BILSTEIN hashtag for that, where they can put it, or hashtag BILSTEIN? Tag us on your projects so that we can see them and check them out, please. We're always interested in seeing cool stuff out there. Shane, as always, fun spending the podcast with you. We don't have a choice here. We get to do this every time, so it's fun for us. We have fun. Thanks for joining us today on podcast, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode.